Welcome to the From Lab to Patient, Garage to Market podcast with your host, Phil Crowley. In each episode, we will discuss professionals serving the tech startup market and the various issues of importance to those companies. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, CrowleyLawLLC.com. Now here's the host of From Lab to Patient, Garage to Market, Phil Crowley.
Hello and welcome to our podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I'm so happy to have with us today Michael Johnson, who is the president of the New Jersey Innovation Institute, one of the centers of innovation in the state of New Jersey. It's affiliated with one of New Jersey's great research universities, New Jersey Institute of Technology, who is an entrepreneur who has gone through many of the trials and travails of founding and building a company. And I thought it'd be really interesting for my audience to hear what it's really like to go out and found a company and work through all of that. Michael, welcome.
Phil, thank you for having me. This is awesome. Looking forward to chatting today.
That's great. Well, Michael, you were very successful in your PhD program at Rutgers and could have gone along the lines of an academic career. And what inspired you to say, well, I'm not going to do that. I want to do something really hard, which is to found my own company?
It's a great question. What motivates an entrepreneur to be an entrepreneur? For me, I got exposed to being an entrepreneur when I was working for NASA during an internship after my undergraduate work. I grew up with a father who was a teacher. My mom worked as well, but I had no entrepreneurs in my family, so I was never actually exposed to entrepreneurship. But I always kind of like the idea of working for yourself. And something I realized while working at Johnson & Johnson as a co-op was that while I liked working in a company, I found that the best opportunity for me to have a really big impact and to really get out there and change the world and bring technologies to market was through starting your own company. There's very few ways to have that much of an impact like there is in a small company where you can build something from scratch, you can create something from nothing and really change the world. And I guess during my 20s, I saw all these other companies that were out there. You saw Facebook and you saw SpaceX and Tesla. And it was really seeing that made me realize that, hey, starting a company is really cool. I can have a great impact and do some great stuff. And serendipitously, I met another student during my PhD work who had invented a cool technology. And it was kind of just like the stars aligned. I had this passion for science, this passion for having an impact. And all those things came together kind of perfectly. And I, by my nature, was always a person who worked really hard, spent a lot of time doing things, spent a lot of effort on things. And it was just a great outlet for me. So I think it was a match for my personality. It was the right place, the right time, and rather serendipitous. I didn't grow up wanting to be an entrepreneur, even know what entrepreneurship really was. And before starting our company, I had actually never taken a business course or done anything on entrepreneurship. So it was pretty new to me personally.
So in other words, you didn't get any prepackaged MBA style learning about what it takes to start a company. You had a great idea, you had a passion around it, and you had a friend with whom to start the business. What were some of the initial surprises, things that you didn't expect when you started your business?
That's a great point. So when we started, it started around this core idea that my co-founder, Tom, had invented at Rutgers, which was a technology for imaging tissues. So mouse brains or biopsies. He had invented a way to image those tissues in 3 dimensions and get a tremendous amount of data from tissues. Much more improved over traditional histology and tissue imaging, where you cut a tissue, you put it on a glass microscope slide and look at it. And what we had done is the opposite of how you start a company. We had a solution looking for a problem. We actually didn't know what the problem was. We just had a really cool technology that I thought was neat. I thought it was exciting. I thought it was cool. It was totally outside of my wheelhouse. I'm an environmental scientist by my PhD educational background and very focused in microbiology. So this histology, imaging, microscopy was more or less way outside of what my discipline was. But once we realized that it was potential for starting a company and building a platform around, we tried to learn as much as possible. But like you alluded to, I had no formal training whatsoever. The first financial model we made I think instead of from going left to right, it went top to bottom. It didn't even make any sense. And looking back now, we learned a lot in a very short period of time, and there was a ton of lessons learned. But I think the most significant one for me is the process of learning. So as a PhD, it's a philosophical degree. It's the process of learning. It really isn't a technical degree. You do a lot of technical work, of course, doing a life sciences PhD, but it's the degree of learning. And the skills that you have in that approach, you can apply to anything. So for business, it's picking up lots of business books, it's reading, podcasts, videos, whatever you can get, and consuming all of that knowledge. So once Tom, my co-founder, and I realized that we wanted to have this company and build it, we just started intaking all of this knowledge, going to seminars, going to courses. I sat in on a bunch of courses at Rutgers on business and tried to learn whatever I could. So I think one of the success points of that early process is learning, being open-minded, realizing I don't know what I'm doing. Other people know more than me, meeting with successful business people and just sitting down, asking them a ton of questions, and really being open-minded and realizing that while you might have a good idea, you know very little about this whole process, especially if you're not an entrepreneur and don't have training there. So learning for me was number one. I'm definitely a lifelong learner.
Well, that seems to be really, as I've seen, one of the incidents of a STEM education: science, technology, engineering, mathematics, because as you know, I'm a proud graduate of Stevens Institute of Technology and am on the board there. And I have always felt that STEM education teaches you a very great skill, which is how to teach yourself anything. And I think that your experience kind of supports that, because you were able to teach, you and Tom were able to teach yourself principles of running a business, which are a different competence than the technology aspects that you originally gained. But you learned how to do that by talking to people, by networking, by picking up books, listening to podcasts, and finding ways to get the information that you needed in order to be successful. Now, in growing a business, founding a business is one thing. Growing a business is certainly another challenge. What were the challenges that you encountered, say, in areas that many technologists struggle in sales and marketing? How did you handle that?
Yeah, it's a great question. As a company grows, it goes through these different inflection points. Initially, when it's you and your co-founders, you're all in. Everyone's working all the time, and this is all you think about. And that's a really special time because it's fun. Very seldom in your life will you have an opportunity to work with other people where everyone has the same incentives, everyone's on the same page, you're all bought into something. That's very exciting. It's very fun. It's also very stressful. You're constantly worrying about money and how to keep the lights on and how to keep things moving. But eventually you get out of that and you say, oh my, we have an actual company. Let's really do this thing. And you start hiring your first employees. You start bringing the people on, and the problems just start changing. So all of a sudden, it's like, what's an employee handbook? How do I hire people? How do I have payroll? How do I pay people? So you go through, and as you mature, you have all these different problems. And then eventually, hopefully you get larger and larger, and you get to the problems that you had mentioned, which are marketing and sales. And for Tom and I, we weren't marketing and sales people, but again, we were scientists. And I think a lot of scientists and STEM folks, they get intimidated by business. It's like this scary world they don't want to look in. It's not objective. It's just soft and squishy. They don't like it, and it's people oriented. But the way Tom and I approached it was just as a scientist would. Let's go into a pharma company. Let's propose our sales process and see what happens and ask a bunch of questions. And the first 10 times you do that, you fall flat on your face, but hopefully you learn something and you find other folks to talk to and you realize, okay, that didn't work. Let's try this other approach. Oh, wow, that worked really well. Let's make it a little bit better. So every time we do something, we'd always A/B test it. We're going to try one thing, we're going to try another thing, see what happens, what are the results, and move on from there. And eventually we were able to build a really strong marketing process for how we're going to grow our business, bring in leads. We also developed a really strong sales process. What is the tool that we can use to go in and actually win customers? And what we wound up finding for our specific business was that we were doing contract research. Let's go to pharma companies. Let's buy them lunch. Let's tell them about cool stuff that we're doing that we think is similar to what they're doing. And let's have a scientific conversation. And almost every single time we did that, someone in the room raises their hand and says, I have the same problem, slightly different, and I'd love to work with you guys. So over time, we built up that repertoire, and we started training our salespeople on how to do that, and we built our team from there. But always continue to learn. And as we'd have problems, it was sitting down and saying to your co-founder and team, I don't know what we're doing. We have this problem. What do you think we should do? And being very open-minded and really also checking your ego at the door and realizing you're not the smartest person in the room all the time on everything, especially all these disparate disciplines that you have to pick up.
Well, you made a really great point, I thought, Michael, with respect to talking about the team. One of the areas that I found in my practice where startups fail is that they fail to recruit and retain a multi-talented team, because as you were pointing out, many of the founders are really very deep into the technology, understand it extremely well, but are not familiar with the aspects of running a business that you need to learn. You and Tom were able to go out and, as you were saying, A/B test your various operations. So you were willing to fail quickly to find out the things that worked.
Right.
And so it seems like it's the flexibility, the willing to put yourself on the line, the willingness to try some things without the assurance that they're going to work, to do basically an experiment, right, to see what does work, focus on the things that do work, and abandon the things that don't work.
Right.
And so you were able to build the company, you were able to attract interest from a Fortune 500 company, Thermo Fisher. How did that happen?
Yeah, well, you have these big companies that are out there, and you can't just call them up and say, hey, I'm Michael Johnson, I have this cool thing, meet with us. Because usually even if the big company has a good intention, they don't know necessarily who's the right person at their company to interface with you. They don't know who that person that you want to connect with is, and you probably don't know either. So even if they want to help you, they might not be able to actually help you, which is a challenge. So what we always try to do is find out who is the critical person at that big company that we need to interact with. Are we connected on LinkedIn? Can we bump into them at a conference? What we found really worked is if we went to a trade show or conference and we knew we'd be there, they would be there trying to meet with them, or we know their colleague would be there trying to get referral that way. But always trying to really network and go down and find out who is the specific person we need to talk to. So is it Jeff from Abcam who does business development for reagent consumables? Okay, we got to meet with Jeff. How do we get in front of him? Okay, maybe he's in Cambridge. Let's try and bring him out to lunch. Let's try and get a coffee with him. So we did a lot of research to find that out. And eventually what would really happen is let's say we couldn't get to Thermo Fisher, we get to someone smaller. We then go to Thermo Fisher and say, hey, we're selling with your competitor. Can we chat with you? And then they say, okay, we probably should look into this. Let's find someone to talk to them. So we would just endlessly try and reach out to people, connect with them, LinkedIn, conferences, trade shows, and meet with these folks. And ultimately, over time, you eventually get to know those people. And after, let's say, 2 or 3 years, we knew every single key person at every single key company in our ecosystem and could make those connections. And eventually they get to the point where they say, no, we're not interested. Maybe if these things you can show to us, or yes, we're definitely interested. So it takes a little bit of time, but it's just networking. You can get in front of those people. And for those people, it's their job to interact with you. It's their job to evaluate you and your technology and be on the forefront of those things. It just takes a lot of legwork and a lot of time and a lot of meetings.
Well, I think that you focus on an issue that is also relevant for companies that are looking for financing. And I always advise my clients to start speaking to financing sources before you need the money. Right. Or before you make the ask for the money, because it's the relationship that the individuals in the financing source, the bank, the angel investors, the venture capital fund have with you, because ultimately things change in a business, and the only things that don't change are the people. And so you have to have confidence in the people. And your experience in working for 2-3 years to establish relationships with the key people who were the gatekeepers to get into access to other decision makers, it seems to me was really one of the key takeaways from your experience and from your success.
Right. Yeah, totally. And it's something I always told our staff is that the people we interact with, they're not going away. The guy or girl who's a VP or a director at Thermo Fisher, they're going to be a CEO in 20 years somewhere else. So make sure you keep those relationships positive. And a lot of founders get very short-sighted. I need money now, and they panic and they're rude and they have bad relationships and they annoy people. The way I look at it is that all the relationships I'm trying to build are for 5, 10, even 20 years down the road. My career isn't going to end in 5 years. It's going to go on for a long period of time. And I want to email those investors and say, hey, I'm Michael Johnson. I'm building this company. You're not interested today, but in 3 years, we're going to hit $10 million in revenue, $2 million in EBITDA, and we'll be looking for a sale in 2 years after that. And when I email them back in 3 years, and I do, and I say, remember when I emailed you, I did every single thing I told you I was going to do. Let's talk. They'll talk. But that's something I think a lot of founders struggle with is building long-term because they're so focused in the short term and running out of money. It's tough and it's scary, but having that long-term viewpoint certainly helps you out. When you go back and you say, wow, I did do what I said I was going to do, that goes a long way. And that investor is definitely going to respond to your call when you do that.
Now, one of the features that is important for startups to think about is kind of assessing their investors and almost doing kind of reverse due diligence on the investors. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience with that?
I would have liked to done more of that during our process. I think every founder would. But what you realize is that the person with the gold makes the rules, the golden rule. So with us, it's not as if usually you have 20 investors who say, I want to give you money. And you're like, well, give us a little bit more. I like you more than that person. You're easy to work with. Usually you don't have that amount of choice. And it's a long tail game. So you talk to 160 investors and you get 159 no's. That's fine. So long as you get one yes. And that's tends to be how it works. So I would say you can do due diligence. You want to call around. You want to find out what other founders who've worked with that investor, what kind of experience they've had. It's relatively easy to do, and I think you should do that. But usually you don't have as much choice as you would like to have. But at the end of the day, the other thing too is you usually don't get the investment deal you want. There's always a compromise. You're never going to get the valuation you want. You're never going to get the terms that you want. But if you don't have the choice and you want to move forward, a lot of times you do have to compromise. So that's a tough one. I think for us, it was more pertinent in the acquisition. When we had 5 or 6 players at the table who wanted to acquire our business, that's really when that was important. Because for Tom and I, we wanted to have a legacy, we wanted to keep building the business, we wanted our employees to be in a good position to keep growing. And that's where we felt like understanding that acquirer was much more important because we actually did have the choice and we're in the driver's seat. We picked an acquirer that we wanted to work with and we thought would be best for our people, then also, of course, for us personally and our shareholders.
Thank you, Michael. Let me take just a brief moment here to introduce our viewers to Crowley Law. We're a boutique law firm with big firm expertise and small firm care and attention to our clients. We are focused and passionate about helping life sciences and other technology entrepreneurs realize their dreams, to take great ideas from the laboratory bench to the patient's bedside, or from the garage to the marketplace, to enrich the lives of thousands or millions of people. As a former physicist, I understand how difficult it is to do the research and development work to actually create new knowledge. And as a lawyer and former in-house counsel at Johnson & Johnson, I also know the difficulties of taking those great ideas and getting them out to the marketplace. Our group of 4 attorneys are very much focused on providing competent, excellent, and cost-effective services to our clients because part of the excitement of what we do is helping our clients be more successful, because I'm a great believer that technology appropriately developed and used will enrich our societies tremendously. So please keep us in mind. You can reach us at info@crowleylawllc.com. We're here to help. All right, Michael, could you describe a little bit more? I was fascinated by your description about the process that you went through when you were looking for an acquisition partner. Can you explain a little bit about what some of our participants might expect in that process?
It's a very personal process. So this is the company you've built, you've poured your heart, your soul into. But there gets to be a time and a place when you say, hey, I don't really want to do this anymore, or this is the right time to sell the business, or it makes sense to have somebody else come in and help you grow the business. For us, we had managed through COVID for about a year and a half, very stressful time to run a business. There were all sorts of problems that you had to work through, capital, clients, COVID itself. I mean, all sorts of problems. And we got through it really well. We actually never declined in growth. There were a couple of tough months early in COVID. We got through it. We picked up a lot of work, picked up a lot of customers. Very tough time to run a business. But what we realized was because of COVID and because of this focus on life sciences, there was a tremendous amount of money that went into life sciences, and it spurred a huge bubble in the space that we were dealing with. So mostly Series A, B, C, venture capital-backed companies we were working with, and then smaller biotechs. Their valuations were going up, the money they had to spend was going up, and we were doing great as a business. But what Tom and I realized was that that money flow would eventually slow down and it might stop. And the value of our company was dependent upon the rate at which we were growing. So if we stopped increasing our growth rate because these guys stopped having funding, or even it just plateaued, our valuation would decline. And what we've seen after the fact is there's a lot of businesses that probably should have sold when we did that didn't. Their revenue has actually gone up 50%, 100%, and their valuations have gone down because the growth rate simply isn't there. The market isn't there the same way it was. Very difficult position to be in for a lot of those companies today. But what we said was, we think this bubble is going to pop, or at the very least, it's going to plateau and our valuations to go down. So why don't we sell the company now, take some money off the table, and find a partner that can help us grow and help us succeed? And the partner we sold to, Bico, they provided us with a valuation very healthy, I think much higher than we probably should have gotten at the time. There was a premium on it because of the competitive nature of the other bids that were out there. There was also just a lot of money in the marketplace. On top of that, Bico had offered to give us money to buy other companies, which we did after the fact, and then also invest in our growth. And that allowed us to hit our objectives, take money off the table, keep growing, keep being the driver's seat of our company, but go through an acquisition and go through a nice exit. So for all those reasons, we were inclined to sell the company. We looked at a number of other deals. We looked at a number of other acquirers. There are the big companies that want to acquire you and basically fire everybody and take over the technology. Right. There are others that are private equity oriented, where it's all about EBITDA, it's all about profitability, and your R&D is to be cut, which wasn't what we wanted to do. So there were a bunch of different scenarios. They had different financial implications for our shareholders, different implications for our employees. And we went with the one that we felt made the most sense for all of our different stakeholders, whether it was the shareholders, the employees, or ourselves. In retrospect, I think we did a really good transaction. I think we went with the right partner, the right time. Definitely don't regret doing the transaction. But it's tough because it's tough valuing shareholders versus employees. One price versus another that has different downsides. So it's not comparing apples to apples. It's a complex decision, but we were fortunate that we had a few to look at and a few to pick from. And I think it did work out well for all of our shareholders who got very significant ROIs on their investments.
Who are the people who helped you make that decision? Because it sounds like it was kind of a discussion. It wasn't a unilateral decision by you or you and Tom, and you were talking to other people who had the perspective of other stakeholders. Can you take us through that?
In every transaction, you have the shareholders who say, yes, let's do this. Usually you have the shareholders who put money in more recently that say, no, keep growing this thing. We don't want to sell it just yet. You have other people who are just done, want to be done with the whole thing and move on. So you never have all the shareholders on board ever in a transaction. And for our transaction, I would say I was the cheerleader. I was the one who felt like this is a bubble. I know the business best. I'm managing our financials and business on a day-to-day basis. We should get out now while things are hot. And not all our shareholders agreed with that. usually you have an advisor in the deal that you go out and is helping find bids. We actually ran the process ourselves, or more accurately, I ran the process. And we did that because we actually knew personally all the acquirers. These are all people that Tom and I could sit down at dinner with and say, hey, buy us for 5, buy us for 10, buy us for 15. They actually make the decision. That's usually not how things work. So our decision was 2 guys at a table saying, I think you're worth this much, I disagree, and going back and forth. Right. That's typically not how transactions work. I think because the size of our transaction, it was more of a peer-to-peer negotiating. We went back to our shareholders and then got our approvals on both sides. But yeah, usually that's just not how things work. So there were a bunch of external advisors that we talked to. Everyone has a different viewpoint. There are the founders that wish they sold. There are the founders that wish they didn't sell. So you try and talk to all these people, understand where they're coming from, why they think the thing that they think, and then trying to apply it to your situation. And at the time, I think some of our shareholders were very unhappy. But since then, watching what's happened to that market just deteriorate, they probably would say, yeah, you were right. This was the right decision. But at the time, it's not always clear or obvious.
Now, you are one of those wonderful entrepreneurs, Michael, who has kind of gained the golden orb. You were able to sell out to a larger company at an attractive price. And then you went inside, some might say, the belly of the beast afterwards, because at first you were responsible to yourself and, of course, to your board of directors. And now you're in this corporate structure. Was that a kind of a culture shock for you? How did that feel?
People say that, but what I think people who haven't been in that driver's seat assume is that when you're an entrepreneur, you're on your own. And there's always someone who's the boss, right? So in a company like Visikol, we had a board of directors, you have shareholders. So there's always a governance team behind you. It's not just you making all the calls and being on your own. In the entrepreneur's seat, you are alone a lot. There's a huge amount of autonomy, much more than I have now or any person has in a corporation. Even as the CEO, you have multiple boards, multiple committees. So you are more constrained, which is definitely true. You're also more constrained as an organization grows in size, because you can't go to your team and say, we're doing one thing one day and we're scrapping that, we're going to something else. So you can do that in a startup and go back to the other thing. So you're more constrained. There is more bureaucracy. There is more politics involved. It is more complex to get things done. So I wouldn't say it's a culture shock. It's just understanding the size and the maturity of an organization. But it is different. It's meaningfully different. And I think that's why some founders, as a company grows, they realize this isn't a place for me anymore. I want to step aside and they want to sell their companies. They don't want to go through the whole life cycle of building a large company. Right. Very few people actually do that or want to do that. For me, I wanted to pick up experience in a larger organization, a different type of organization, and also experience outside of life sciences. So our think tank, New Jersey Innovation Institute, we do a lot of work in defense, a lot of work in healthcare, a lot of work even in professional and corporate education. We also have entrepreneurship, which is, of course, more in my wheelhouse, but we're doing a lot of things that are outside of my suite of disciplines. So for that reason, and getting more management experience in a large organization, I was very excited by the role. And my passion is for getting IP out of universities. There's so much great knowledge just stuck in our research universities where the faculty does not want to create a company. It's not what they do. They create cool stuff. They don't build it and translate it. So there's this opportunity to do that. And that's one of the core focus areas of our organization, is to help with that translational research and building and creating companies. So for all those reasons, I was very excited for this, but it is meaningfully different for sure.
Well, and you've associated yourself with one of the leading research universities in New Jersey, doing hundreds of millions of dollars in research every year. What's your vision and goal for NJII?
First and foremost, we have a strategic plan that we laid out going out to 2030, which aligns with the university's strategic plan going out to 2030. And for us, we're really trying to go after growth. We do a lot of great work today, about $40 million a year in different contracts with Department of Defense, Department of Health. And we're trying to grow that bolus of work. One of the core things that we're trying to build out, though, is a venture studio. And our idea for this venture studio is to try and take ideas from university and build companies around them. we can go ahead and have faculty and student-led startups. We can try licensing, but still a lot of ideas get stuck in the university. So what we're trying to do, we're putting a large investment into this, is building a venture studio. We put $500,000, $2 million into ideas with corporate sponsors, and we build companies around them. We hire CEOs, we hire CTOs, and we build companies with partners. That, for me, I think is very exciting. It's a passion project as well. It's something where we can really have a meaningful impact on the world. And as NJII, we've actually done this in the past, more so unintentionally. We built a small scale cell and gene therapy manufacturing company called Biocentric that we sold a few years ago for about $73 million. So this concept of venture studio is something we're really digging into, and we should be launching in the next few months here officially. Outside of that, we're also trying to expand into AI, machine learning. Everyone's talking about it. It's a buzz. But the question for every university is, what do you actually do? You can have supercomputing, you can have students, but what really do you do and how do you add value? And the thing that we're doing and launching is a division within NJII that's focused on AI and ML. And what we're going to do is help small and mid-sized businesses adopt AI into their organizations. These are the non-sexy problems every business has. So for example, you might be a small construction company. You know AI can help you with reading resumes. You know AI can help you with looking at your project plans, architectural drawings, and making estimates. You don't know how to do it. You don't know how to get started. We're building a team that can actually do that and do consulting projects as a service for those businesses and help companies within New Jersey, especially small and mid-sized companies, get up to speed with AI and implement these tools without having to go to a Deloitte or an Accenture that's incredibly expensive. In the process, we're giving our students experiential learning. We're giving these bright young students the ability to apply what they know to real world problems. So those are two things that we're really excited about. And with that, it aligns with our mission of trying to be on the forefront of innovation and spurring innovation in New Jersey.
That is great, Michael. Michael, if any of our viewers wanted to get in touch with NJII or learn about some of their programs, where can they go to get that information?
The best place is njii.com. We have a newsletter we send out monthly. We also have our LinkedIn that you can find us on. We post regularly on there as well. Outside of that, emailing through our website is probably the best place to get direct contact.
All right, that's super. Michael, thank you so much. We've just about run out of time. This was a wonderful conversation, and I'm hoping that our viewers have benefited from the insights that you've provided by kind of pulling back the curtain on what building, developing, selling, and transitioning from a company can really look like, and I really appreciate it. NJII is certainly one of the leading technology developers in New Jersey. I just want to remind people that Crowley Law is here to help innovators who are looking to follow along Michael's pathway. And we certainly have a great deal of information. Please visit our website at crowleylawllc.com, where we have a number of pieces of information, ebooks, white papers that deal with problems that are typical for young companies, startup companies, and technology innovators generally. With that, I want to thank you again for tuning into our podcast and wish you great success in your own ventures.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you, Michael.
You've been tuning into the From Lab to Patient, Garage to Market podcast with your host, Phil Crowley. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, crowleylawllc.com. If you found this information helpful, please subscribe, like, leave a positive review, and share with others.